Mic check. All right, let's pop us in and begin. All right, today's topic's going to be shifting from the whole art thing, and I wanted to focus on sobriety as I pop nicotine in my mouth, which is, other than caffeine, probably the extent of my external addictions or, chemical addictions. So, sobriety. Have we all had our tosses and turns with substance abuse, addiction of sorts? I think we all have. Those of you who haven't, I tip my hat to you. And I can't say that I've been the strongest to avoid substance abuse or addiction throughout my not only adult life, but my teenage life too. I was about 16 when I started smoking marijuana and doing it quite regularly to the extent that I think most people nowadays do it, which is throughout the day, every day of the year. I started drinking when I was 14. I was always a big kid, so a big kid with a lot of confidence who could order alcohol to a party, and somehow I didn't get ID'd and be the person to facilitate booze drinking at our young teenage parties. And I remember specifically in high school, the second I got a taste of partying, it was like the summer going into the 10th grade. I just became addicted. I still have memories of sitting in class just waiting for Friday to roll around so we could get drunk. So I could be at a party, so I could be chasing and talking to girls, so I could be bullshitting with my friends, getting into trouble. And again, like I mentioned, at 16, when I first got high, I mean, it's a funny story about that too. Got high probably for the better part of the first year, and I didn't even really get high. I wasn't inhaling it all the way. And I remember the first time I actually got high. It was almost a year after that very first experience. So I guess I acted like I was high the first year. Like I said, I was not inhaling smoke into my lungs, or not nearly enough to give me the real effect that marijuana has. And I'll never forget that first experience either. We were at a park, hiding behind a berm of trees to keep ourselves out of the public eye. And I was watching my friend smoke a joint. And I remember him specifically taking a hit and sucking it into his lungs. How I never noticed it before is beyond me, but watching him suck it into his lungs. And I acted it out basically when the joint came my way. And it hit me like a punch in the face. I don't remember coughing. I guess from just keeping the smoke in my mouth and in this region basically from here up, it had, maybe calloused the back of my throat. Anyway, I took that hit in, and within a couple of minutes, the marijuana swell, it took over and swarmed my body with good vibes, and I was hooked. Okay, so as I mentioned in other videos, I was an artist, not predominantly. my focus in high school, but thereafter, that's all I did, and that's all I've done since. And I'm sure some people out there who are creative, doesn't matter if you're a musician or an artist, illustrator, something like that, you'll find that the high you get from weed and your creative process, they tend to function well together. And it can be a pretty toxic combination if you start to depend on the substance for your pathway to creativity, which was a struggle of mine for, I would say, almost 25 years. Like I said, started smoking marijuana regularly on the daily at 16, and that continued up until maybe 5 months ago. Now, when I was about 35, I took a step back and started to minimize the amount of weed I would smoke in a day. And in, I don't know, I'd say from late 20s to that time, 35, was way more strict about keeping weed, being high, separate from when I was responsible for doing a job. So if I was at a day job on somebody else's, on someone's property, working for somebody's company, working for somebody's restaurant, I never crossed the two. I knew that I was sharper and more focused and just sharper, when I was sober. But the second I would get out of work, whatever my job was, it was back home and getting high again to decompress, to get into the creative flow and sit down and do my work. So, I mean, that's been my life, and I, like most potheads, would defiantly defend it. Very, very argumentative when it would come to anybody trying to question my usage of it, my abuse of it. And I was a functioning pothead, predominantly. The drinking, that was pretty prevalent throughout high school and most of my 20s. There were a few years there where I really drank pretty heavy. But, booze, it leaves you in such a shitty state after a night of drinking. That recovery time, it just sucks. And I never liked it. I never liked losing control too much. And that's something that didn't happen with pot. You depending on the substance of alcohol you're drinking, you get into the hard stuff, you black out, you change into a different person. Your inhibitions, obviously, are out the fucking window. So you're doing, you're saying, and you're acting in ways that you normally wouldn't. And I remember in my 20s drinking booze. It was a way to just come out, say whatever, do whatever. And of course, when you're reeling from it the next day, if you can remember it, you're usually in a state of regret and hang your head in embarrassment of the way you acted. So as time progressed, I drank less and less. And, until I moved to the States and moved to the Midwest, where I saw that drinking habits were more prevalent in people who were closer to middle age, and just how detrimental that could be to their health. I I guess it never dawned on me just how detrimental drinking alcohol could be. I didn't even know what cirrhosis of the liver was until probably 3 or 4 years ago. Had no idea about it. So, I consider myself lucky that I never got that close to having that disease, um, because it obviously can kill you. It's absolutely terrible. Um, so, pot, like I said, was the predominant uh, substance of choice. Like I said before, I could manage it. I was a functional pothead. And obviously, the older I got, the better I was at compartmentalizing it. There was a time for smoking weed and utilizing it for creativity. There was a time to be sober, to be sharp. I also smoked cigarettes. I think I started pretty heavy into like smoking a pack, um, either daily. Well, it became daily, but I did that pretty prevalent through my 20s and into my 30s. And I quit cigarettes in 2020, around around the COVID period. I One day in May, I just had enough and was really starting to become critical of my actions, and I started to give a shit about life, and I thought, well, maybe I should try to heal up a little bit, and I'm no saint. I went from smoking cigarettes, quitting cold turkey, and shortly thereafter switching to a nicotine vape, which which didn't last that long. I did that until like I don't know, from like late 2020 to the fall of and late 2021. I had switched to vapes, but then I went cold turkey once I moved to upstate New York. And for a while there, all I was doing was smoking pot when I would get back from my day job. And eventually I picked up a vape again, just being in an environment, be it the place I was working at. I was working with a lot of younger kids. They were all, in their early 20s, all younger than the age of 25, and they all hit the vape. And when the job would get stressful and you'd go out in the back, I'd be bumming their vapes and this is pretty good, this fruity flavor shit. And it didn't take long for me to be like, I don't feel right bumming all the time, so I'm just going to go and buy my own. And that turned into another addiction. And I kept that right up until I moved out here to the Midwest in late 2024. So since that point, 2024, I quit the vape cold turkey. Shortly thereafter, I picked up the Zyn, and that's my big one I'd like to overcome now. It's funny how it's addictive. I mean, just like when I smoked cigarettes, or just like when I smoked vapes, in the initial phase, you get the hit, you get the high from it, and the buzz or whatever. But it slowly, your body just becomes tolerant to it, and before you know it, you're just what is it they say about heroin users? You're chasing the dragon, right? And now I'm going through one of these a day. So I mean, thank God I can afford it, but it's playing on my mind a lot that I need to work it out of the system. So, but at this juncture, at 40 years old, I don't really drink anymore. It's purely a social thing, and I do not drink past a certain point. like I mentioned, I do know what cirrhosis of the liver is now and have seen it firsthand. Um, my mother, since she's moved out to the Midwest as well, she lives in the state below me, and she works. Actually, she's retired from her career, but she still works anyway, and she's going to for a period of time until she can retire fully, collect her security and all that stuff. But she works in the medical field, and she she reports a lot of cases to me where young people, people my age, have destroyed their liver from alcohol abuse, and it's just incredible. This small town that I live in, it's pretty much the only thing you can do for fun. Go play pool, go play darts, go gamble, and drink while you do so. There's really nothing else to do. So a lot of people out here suffer from it too. But like I said, I kind of stopped boozing hard at the end of my 20s. It's funny, you know. It's just so ubiquitous in our culture that's what you do when you go out to socialize. So, I'm still guilty of having a beer or two once in a blue moon, or a beer, or some hard liquor, a mixed drink or what have you. Um, and I've got it really under control. I've had 4 beers in my fridge for over a month now that I don't feel the urge to have at the end of a long day. My job, it's not overly strenuous or stressful. It's, I like being focused and sober. And like I said, I quit smoking pot 4 or 5 months ago, cold turkey again. So I've kind of settled into having my mind sharp, and it's really good. With the pot, I was saying, I used to use it as a catalyst to get me into a creative mindset, or get into the zone, if you will. And like I said, I would have defended it anytime anybody would try to tell me that I'd be fine without it. I really believe that was my way of getting into that mindset of being truly creative, and expanding my thought process. But it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, And I guess as you get older and you mature, you start to think critically about these things, and now that I do have like a proper career, making good money, 401k, all the boxes checked off. I live in the States now, and I had grown up in Canada until the age of 35, taking for granted when I lived there just how convenient it was to be able to walk into a hospital and get touched up for something. I used to be a bit of a scrapper back in my teen and 20s, and you get into a fight and some guy would pop you in the eye and have a big gusher coming out the side here. You just walk into a hospital, they stitch you up, send you on your way. When I started getting into, I did duck hunting for a while, and one year I busted my leg out in the field all by myself. I had basically sprained my knee, and I hobbled out of there, out of the duck blind, and back to my car and right to the hospital. And they fixed me up, identified the problem, and got me some crutches, and not a cent. So now that I live out in the States, it's crazy. Like you just can't walk into a hospital and get stitched up without facing a series of medical bills. and the health system's completely different here. So back to my point, I have this day job, and it's a career, it's a real job, and having medical benefits is incredible. Um, I've been I'm in my second year of this career now, and I haven't had to use my health insurance or my health care package at all, thankfully. And in in conjunction with all the other things I'm mentioning, sobriety, obviously, you're going to mitigate having to go to a hospital for some kind of ailment that you gave yourself, essentially. Obviously, I like my career. I appreciate my life, and my skill as an artist and my passion as an artist. I want that to continue as long as I can possibly have it. If I can live to be 80, that would be great. So, all of these things have helped me mature and change my mindset towards the future. And my health is obviously very important, as it should be for you too. And I guess this video is directed at anybody who's struggling with any kind of substance abuse. Uh, when you're young, it's so easy to be frivolous with your money and your energy and your focus. But as you get older and you start to hone in on what's really important and what actually matters in this life that we live, and when you are around people who haven't come to those conclusions yet, and they still well into their 30s, even after. I know people who are in their 40s and 50s who haven't changed that style at all about themselves, still smoking cigarettes, still drinking heavily. They just don't know how to quit it. It's a real weakness, and it's a struggle. It takes a lot of willpower to get to a point in your mind where you really value your short time here on earth, and your health, which is arguably the most important thing of all. You want to be good for your job. You want to be good for your partner. And if you're married and you have children, you want to be good for your wife and your kids. Any weakness that you have that tells you to decompress by smoking weed or drinking alcohol, or partying with heavy drugs, doing cocaine or fucking opiates or something, even pharmaceutical drugs, any kind of band-aid that you're patching up your pain with. It's just so detrimental to you. And I don't know, I wish I came across this way of thinking earlier in life, and such is life. Sometimes you got to go through hell to get to heaven, I guess. You don't see the forest for the trees until it's too late in some circumstances. But luckily for me, I pulled my head out of my ass in the nick of time. And don't get me wrong, I work in civil engineering, so I'm on construction sites a lot. I do a lot of field work, and I'm around grunts and contractors and crane operators, and they all smoke cigarettes to get them through the day. And I see a guy smoking a cigarette, and I still get that need, that want. And once in a blue moon, maybe once a year, I'll bum a cigarette from somebody. But at least where I'm at now, if I smoke that cigarette, it's just one, and I'm like, oh, these things are god awful. They're the worst. Stinking, coughing, lungs burning. It's not good. It's not good. And everyone out in the States here, they all smoke the Marlboros, and they're just the harshest fucking things ever. Back in Canada, the cigarettes we had, they were so smooth, you know. Probably why I would smoke a pack a day. Um, so, so you get older and you start valuing your life, you start valuing your time. I've also had a lot of, um, I've experienced a lot of loss. So family members, friends have died. This happens, but there's a handful of them that it was due to substance abuse, or at least the substance abuse aided to how they met their demise. Um, Probably 2015, it was like a domino effect. One one person close to me died, and it wasn't long after before another one died. And these were people who were either my age or close to it, either younger or just a little older. And that really starts opening up your eyes, seeing people go prematurely. Uh, Women, men, and like they're your friends, they're your family, they're people that you love, and you don't expect them to not be around anymore. And it really does something to your mindset. You just like, holy fuck, like TJ's not here anymore. Holy fuck, Selena's not here anymore. These people are gone forever. Um, I moved in with my grandmother, who lived in upstate New York. I lived with her for a very short time before she passed away. She had lung cancer, never smoked a cigarette in her life. But my grandfather, he was a pack a day guy for most of his entire life, all like throughout my mother and her siblings' childhood, and for a good 15, 20 years into my life. He quit probably 10 years before he inevitably died. I don't think he died from lung cancer. He had some other kind of cancer that spread throughout his body and took him out. But watching my grandmother die from lung cancer was pretty tough. And then just last year, I lost my uncle, who was very, very important to me. A man I adored and had a very rich affinity for, and he died from lung cancer, which had spread throughout his body. I and I can get into that another time. I'd love to touch on his story, but he's also dealing with a lot of stress. He had a stressful job. He was going through a divorce, and I think it was just a compounding of all the bad shit in his life, and he just couldn't take it anymore. And by the time they found any cancer in him, it had spread throughout his body. So, I mean, sad to say, but I don't think he had a chance. So, when that happened, obviously I had already quit cigarettes for quite some time. I'd already been done with cigarettes for about 4.5 years. Obviously, since I moved out here to the Midwest in late 2024, I haven't done vaping, so my lungs have definitely taken a healing for sure. I don't drink very often, and like I explained earlier, when I do drink, it's a couple of beers. I don't drink to get drunk anymore. It's just to loosen up a little bit, and it's usually when I find myself in a social setting, some libations to make the night a little more entertaining, and that's it. I absolutely dread a hangover or dehydration or anything like that. And so, to expand on sobriety, once you start thinking super critical about your health, it's only a matter of time before you are expanding on that, and pushing it into other aspects of your life, like your health. So the food we eat and the things we can consume, they're so the food we eat, the things we drink. If you are taking that for granted, you don't even realize how much you're poisoning yourself. Of course, you're not getting high from it, but in a sense, it's activating dopamine receptors. You go to McDonald's, you eat a bag of chips, you eat a bag of candy. All these things are absolute poison, and I think with the age of information and the amount of information you can obtain through social media and the internet, it's kind of hard to look the other way. And again, like I said, I've got all these examples in my life now that have made me value my life and the time I have left. I'm middle-aged, right? So the time I have left, I want those years to be the best possible. And, having your health intact, it makes everything else in your life so much easier. Dealing with stress, dealing with anything, dealing with anything financial, dealing with physical stuff, I'll talk to guys who are younger than me, talk about how their body aches, and I don't know if it's just me and my genetics or what it is, but I'm not like overly crazy regime with fitness or anything. My job keeps me fairly active, but I'd say the best thing I do is I pound water. That's pretty much all I drink. Like water and coffee. Those are the only fluids going into my body, and tea. And so, I've researched a lot of this stuff since it's not hard. You like one Instagram reel that's talking about health, and all of a sudden the algorithm is just pumping you with all of this health recommendation. So, I've learned that a big part of where people gain weight is obviously the processed sugar that goes into the food that we eat, junk food and shit drinks. I don't drink Coca-Cola anymore. I don't drink soft drink. I don't have juice anymore in my diet or anything with added sugar, period. And it's amazing how much better you feel, A. B, how your body will like naturally shed the weight. I was never fat or anything, but I would always carry a lot of weight around my midsection. Always had prominent love handles, if you will. And since I've cut out like the processed sugar shit, it's incredible how the body just like maintains its natural form. No extra fat. I probably have, I don't know, 15% body fat total. It's a little tiny bit of pudge on my tummy, but that's about it. Otherwise, people would say I'm skinny. And so, yeah, with removing alcohol, that's another thing. I was more of a beer drinker than I was a hard liquor drinker throughout throughout most of my adult life. And again, beer is just loaded with sugar, and it's got other shit that's woven into it that is not any good for your testosterone. I was one of those guys, and this might be TMI, but I was one of those guys that if I got drunk to a point, like when I was with a chick, I couldn't get it up, If I was too drunk or too fucking hopped up on some drugs, it's like, there's no fucking way that we're gonna romp in the sack that night. It's just not happening. Limp noodle. And again, since I've cut all that shit out of my life, it's incredible how how much that doesn't affect me anymore. So, in addition to, not drinking and not drinking any kind of sugary drinks or any of that bullshit, I've obviously changed my eating habits as well. Um, Pretty much sticking to like a whole food diet, a lot of protein. So my my family who lives in the next state over, my my sis, my brother-in-law, my mother, we all buy a cow every year. Uh, Sister and brother-in-law, they'll buy half a cow. My mother and I will buy the other half. So we have ground beef and steaks that last us through the year. The end of the year comes and there's still plenty of ground beef and a few steaks left over. It's amazing. So steak, chicken, um, a few vegetables are in my diet. I don't do that full on carnivore shit. Natural fats. So, I'm eating the beef fat. I'm eating the fat on the chicken, eggs, fucking avocados, uh, bacon once in a blue moon. I mean, I love bacon, but I don't know. Pigs are nasty creatures. You can do your research. I don't know about eating those things. Maybe the Jews have and the Muslims, they've got a good approach to not eating pig meat. My grandfather too. He never liked pig meat. He was from Germany, so I feel like I've tapped into whatever that is, and I definitely mitigate or minimize my pork intake. Other than that, some probiotic, prebiotic shit. My sugar pretty well comes from fruit nowadays. And it's just amazing. Like, I feel great most of the time. I'd say the only exercise I do are push-ups. I have a chin-up bar in the other room, and I try to stretch. And then hydrate. Like keeping your hydration up is so important. And when I think back throughout the years, like especially in my 20s, I don't recall drinking water a fraction of the amount of water I drink now. I'm really trying to get my, what, like a gallon and a half in me a day. This water bottle's convenient, it's a liter. So just pound a few of these throughout the day. I put sea salt in it or Celtic salt in it, and that supposedly helps your body to absorb it. And seemingly with all the abuse that I've taken on with different substances and terrible eating habits throughout my adult life, it's amazing that I actually feel as good as I do. So, there's something to be said about being able to heal. And I've never been a big fan of the medical or the hospitals, the medical industry. Never been hopped up on pharmaceutical drugs, never taken antidepressants, although the alcohol at one point would have been some form of a depressant, and obviously the marijuana just sending my dopamine receptors through the roof, just like constantly dopamine hits. So like, I mean, I'm pretty well sober these days at 40 years old. Pot, like I said, out of the equation entirely. I don't think about it anymore. I don't have cravings for it. Obviously, once in a while, on a beautiful day, it's like, oh man, I would love to smoke a joint, just to feel that high, but it's really not that strong of a need. And as time keeps going on, I'm happier and happier that I've X'd it out of my life entirely. I have no paraphernalia anymore. It's never in the house. I live right beside a state. Like I'm like, I don't know, 20 minutes to the state line of the state that's south of me. and then it's another, I don't know, 40 minutes, an hour to a dispensary in the state that's to the west of me, where pot is legal, and so it's easy enough to acquire. I don't have the need for it anymore, and I don't know. It's like a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in these vlogs. It's easier said than done. When you think you need something and you're dependent on it, it's really hard to shake it. And getting yourself to a point where you're strong enough to completely exit out, it's not easy. It takes a lot of willpower. It takes a lot of perspective. And I could only recommend to any young listeners that are following along. I'm sitting here, I'm cracking jokes about it, I'm laughing at my experience from the past. It's funny because it's so silly that we do this, that we accept it as normal in our culture, and we don't challenge it enough. We don't challenge the food that we eat enough. We just go with the flow. And this it's all poison, And I don't know, when you really start taking the reins of your life, taking the bull by the horn, and changing your approach, changing your perspective, changing your diet, changing your lifestyle, it's just so much better. And again, like I said, I'm 40. I don't ache. Any problems that I've had, I've found like home remedies online, tested them out, and some of them worked incredibly well. So, homeopathy or, home remedies, definitely worth a try. It's not going to hurt you, especially if it's not a harmful substance. Like I said, I've never been on pharmaceutical drugs, and I'm going to try my hardest throughout my life to never be on them. And as the future comes my way, I'm going to continue on with my diet and my newly formed habits and ride that out. To touch real quickly before I end this on how I used to use pot as a catalyst to get into a creative mindset. I used to think I couldn't draw if I wasn't high out of my mind. I felt like that was my only motivation, my only thing keeping me interested and focused on it. And I will say, after I quit pot 4 or 5 months ago, there was about a week or so after I stopped cold turkey where I wasn't sitting here at my little studio and working. And I was having a little bit of hard time in that time period, finding the motivation to sit down and do it. But up until that point, I had finished the first issue, more or less, of my comic book series here, and really all I had to do after that point was like promo art, variant covers, poster art, pinups, things like that, things I want to put into my Kickstarter. So, like, once my body had shed every last trace of THC, I had work to do. And when I'm not high and when I'm not out there partying, which I never do, I don't have any friends, it wasn't long before I started sitting down in my office chair again and picking up my stylus and turning on my Wacom and started drawing again. And like I said, now it's been 4 months of pure sobriety for the most part, and it hasn't affected me at all. I'm still as interested as ever. I'm still as motivated as ever. I'm probably producing better work now and taking less shortcuts. It's something weird that happens to you when you're in that, you know, heightened dopamine state of mind. You think that you're producing like the best work you've ever done when really you're not. You could be doing better. I remember I used to play guitar. I played guitar from 13 to about 32, and then I hung that up and and focused purely on comic books. And when I would play guitar high out of my mind, I would think I was hitting every note, and I like to play technical death metal. That was my thing. I like to play, and I'd be thinking I'd be hitting every note. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with technical death metal, but it's technical. It's actually really hard to play, really fast. A lot of stuff going on between chugging, picking scales, pinch muting, doing arpeggios, scales. It's fucking hard. And I was good, but I probably wasn't that good. I was, and I would record myself sometimes just to see how well I was performing. And if I was to watch those now, I'd be like, yeah, you're playing sloppy. You're not as good as you think. You're just high. So we're at 46 minutes here. I'm gonna cancel this video, and I just wanted to talk about being sober. Like it's good, and I can't recommend it enough. And healthy eating habits and hydration and a little bit of exercise. I mean, I have no interest in being in a gym and trying to look like Thor. I don't give a fuck about any of that shit. When I take off my shirt, I look good. No flabs, no wrinkles. My body's still in great shape. Stretching, that's important. Stretching, hydration, some push-ups, keep my strength up, some chin-ups and pull-ups. That between those two exercises alone, my body stays in pretty good shape. I've got abs that poke through. My pecs are still in good shape. I'm a tall guy, so my arms are fairly lanky. I'm not like one of these guys who's between 5'5" and 5'11", who's got shorter arms and their biceps are all beefy. I've got fucking lanky, gangly arms, but they're toned, and I'm toned, and like I said, I barely put a fucking effort into it. So take it for what it is. If you think you need to start really focusing in on your sobriety, and I can touch on this in the future too. I'm going to talk a lot of crazy shit on this vlog as I progress with it, but I would like to preach more positivity than negativity, and I think the world in its current state needs all the positivity it can get. So yeah. Thanks for listening. I'm Lupo. I'm the creator and owner of Dope Comics. And this Monday coming up, April the 6th, I'm going to be releasing my comic book as a digital, I guess it's a PDF. Maybe it's just online, but I'm going to be putting it on a Google Drive. I still have to do some research on how to do this, but I'm going to be releasing the first full issue on a Google Drive link across all my social media platforms. So I will link those social media platforms below. The ones that are predominant are Instagram, TikTok, and I guess Kick. I'm going to start streaming there because I stream on TikTok, and it's so gay. I get into a heated hypothetical argument with nobody, and the AI thinks that I'm being hateful, and they've suspended me 3 times now. So I guess it's only a matter of time before they fucking ban my account. It's retarded. So my end goal is that I build a following here on YouTube, and I can just stream here, do my do my art streams, chill out, interact with my audience, do reactions, just have a good old time, and promote positivity. As like I said, I'm a bit of a smart ass, and I'm not a nihilist. I'm not a black pill guy, but I definitely I don't take things too seriously. So anyway, we're at 50 minutes, fucking going on and on. Well, you heard it first. Simpy the Cotton Wiener's coming out on Monday. You can read it for free. So follow me in my social links, and I'll get that out to you. All right? Thanks. Bye.